Welcome back to the Last Mile Radio on Sirius XM. And Beverly, who do we have in the studio today?
Chris, I am so honored to announce that today we have Ryan Leaf on the Last Mile Radio. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much
for being here.
Yeah,
thank you.
Excited for the opportunity. So I appreciate we making it all work.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And, this is supported by SiriusXM. We're on the network, but also uniquely, this program is available inside of our prison classrooms across the country. So, the words of inspiration that you have, your story really is a driver because, as you know, there's a process of transformation, which we'll talk about, and all of our students are in the midst of that transformation. So this is really important conversation to have. And with that said, your story's been well chronicled, but it's really important to understand sort of the origin of that and helpful to see what the transformation was for you. So a little bit about background and what led you down that path. And at that time, what was that sort of transformation as well?
Well, for me, it was addiction. I was a professional football player and had multiple surgeries. I think we ended up with about 15 surgeries playing the sport. And I became addicted to opiate painkillers. And it's actually the only drug I've ever taken. I smoked marijuana when I was in Amsterdam one time, simply because, why not?
You have to when you're there.
When in Rome mentality, when in Amsterdam. And I didn't like it. But I've never tried any drug. I didn't drink until my 18th birthday. So it wasn't something that factored into my life. And so the only drug that I'd ever seen was prescribed to me by a doctor. And I became addicted to it after my career was over, dealing with a lot of the mental health aspect of things, the failure of not being a success in the NFL in the eyes of many, allowed it to manifest itself where I just needed to numb, and that was it. And so that was my answer. And for the longest time was going to doctors and just manipulating my way through that. It really wasn't in my eyes a manipulation because I was in pain. It was physical pain before, and now it was emotional pain, and I was just not telling them about the emotional pain. I thought I was doing the wrong thing the right way. It's the best way to put it. But, like anything, tolerance goes, money disappears, and, like any addict, you become a criminal. And that's what I became. I became a guy that victimized my hometown. My hometown was my drug dealer. I didn't know a drug dealer. So would go to friends' houses, pretending I was interested in spending some time with them, excuse myself to the restroom and go through the medicine cabinet. And 9 times out of 10, people had some sort of opiate painkiller in their medicine cabinet, from whether that was from 2 years ago or who knows. Because people aren't like me. They go to the doctor and they got a prescription for 30 and they may take 3 or 4 pills. And I'd always think, what the heck's wrong with these people? And so when that wore out its welcome, I became just a run-of-the-mill burglar, where I'd knock on doors, and if they were unlocked, I'd let myself in, announce if anybody was home. If not, I would, rummage through their house until I found pills. And I would do that throughout my hometown of Great Falls, Montana. I tell people all the time, if you at any point felt like when you came home that someone had been in your house in between 2010 and 2012, I was probably in your house.
Wow.
It's not a very big house. It's not a very big city. Small town in Montana, of course. But yeah, it just, but luckily for me, I'm not a very good criminal. And the sheriff's department showed up one night and essentially saved my life and took me to jail. And I didn't get out for, 32 months.
It's so interesting you say that, because so many of our students in the Last Mile program tell us that if they didn't go to prison, they'd be dead.
Yeah, I even found a way to bond out like 80 days in. I got some bondsman to believe my lies. I wanted to get out so I could just, get as many pills as I could and probably just take off and ride until the wheels fell off. And somehow my parents convinced me to go turn myself back in. And that may have been one of the hardest things you can imagine. And I don't know why I actually did it. It's not what I wanted to do, certainly. It was the worst place I could imagine, because I was in solitary confinement during that supposedly for my safety, they were telling me. So I'd been 83 days withdrawing and in my own head. And that's the worst place you want to be, is like alone in my brain. And so, I had gotten out, and I was like, my parents convinced me to turn myself back in, and I did. I don't know why. Probably another, example of my higher power working for that. And then I would go and I would stay there. Now, when I went back, it wasn't like things had changed. Like, I didn't do anything for 26 of the 32 months that I was in there. I just, I got angrier. I got more fearful. I got more judgmental. Health went to hell. I just pretty much sat on my bunk, watched TV, and messed with the guards. And, there wasn't any rehabilitative programs at all available to me. I was in a for-profit prison in Montana, CCA, and so Crossroads Correctional Facilities, and so of course there wasn't any. That's a for-profit business, and
the last mile is not operating in that facility.
Yeah. They should, just for the guys, because the guys need hope. It shouldn't be limited to the fact that the for-profit prisons are what they are, because there's individuals that are still in there contracted out from the state prisons all over the country that need hope. I think that's the thing that gets taken away the most.
But let me ask you a question, though. You said there weren't programs, but were you in a mindset, if there were programs, you would have done something?
No, it didn't matter, probably.
Yeah. Because let's not downplay your situation. It was a very high-profile situation.
So, it was very public.
And you were in solitary or segregated housing to protect yourself because you were high profile in their eyes.
In their eyes, yeah. When I got to state prison, I wasn't placed in any segregation, and no one, everybody was in awe of me. Prisoners were like, this dude played in the NFL. They're all from Montana. No one from Montana, especially quarterback, plays at the level at which I did and got to the NFL. So it was more about questions and and kind of starstruck. No one wanted to mess with me. I'm also 6'7" at the time, 275 pounds. Like, no one's going to mess with me anyway.
Right.
And if they did, then there's probably going to be a problem with that. I think people forget that from time to time when they like to talk shit. So it can I say shit?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
It's a serious thing.
All right. Oh, you just looked immediately over there at her, and I was like, okay, all right.
I always check with Liz, our producer, to say if it's okay. It's okay.
And so, the segregation part of it early on was like, I couldn't understand it, but it is what it is. I put myself there. What you can't control at that point, what's going to happen to you.
But what was the seminal moment? Because you had to have change and you had to have an epiphany. What was that?
My roommate was an Afghan Iraqi war veteran who had been home on leave and had done something that I think a lot of people have probably done in their life, and that's go out drinking and drive drunk. And he killed somebody that night. 23 years old, I think. Been 8 years. He was not resolute with that. Him being that, he'd made amends for what he'd done. And he was trying to better himself, he just was. And I just looked at him like on a daily basis thinking he was an idiot. Like, what are you doing? Look at us. We're in red jumpsuits. We wear numbers. We're losers. What are you doing? And I guess finally one day he'd had enough of my attitude, and he felt comfortable enough to confront me, I guess. And he just said, I had my head buried in the sand, and he suggested that we go down to the prison library and help prisoners who didn't know how to read learn how to read. A novel concept that I never even thought was a thing. And so I've had many of those kind of come to Jesus moments from people my whole life, coaches, mentors, family. And I just, I told them to go away. I got this. I'm the big, strong football player. And so I can't tell you why I went, maybe because the substance had been out of my system for 26 months. But I still remember walking down the hallway in that red jumpsuit like a little child, like metaphorically kicking rocks in my shoes and just kind of like, this is stupid. This isn't going to help anybody. Doesn't even know how important I am. the idea that the guy in the red jumpsuit in a prison hallway is important, I think, is the problem in all this. And so I walked into this room where you're supposed to show no vulnerability, or because it can get you hurt, or something else taken advantage of. And here's these, middle-aged men, much of them Native Americans, who came up to me and first off said, "Hey, I never learned how to read. Can you help me?" And I'd never heard another man say that in my life, growing up in Montana in a cowboy culture and in locker rooms. Never seen another man or a peer say, "I'm really hurting here. Can you help me with this?" So if you haven't seen it or heard it, how are you supposed to ever do it yourself? And so that day it started, and it's not like it was some epiphany. You don't have it. It's not in the moment. If I would have just, never came back to that library, nothing would have changed. It was about showing up at that point. It was just about showing up. And so I started to keep coming back and keep coming back. It's not like you don't go to the gym one day, wake up, and the next day you look like The Rock. You got to go do the business. It's about showing up. And that's what happened. 2 weeks passed, 3 weeks passed. So the months passed, and I'm sleeping better. I'm more personable. I'm actually talking to my family on the phone. 3 things that I hadn't done probably in a decade.
So you were helping them, but you're helping yourself in a big way.
Well, yeah. What I found, I was actually being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. And I used to think what I did on Saturdays and Sundays was how I was being of service. It's just silly. That's not true. But the funny thing is, and I also associated service work with money most of my life. So when I was playing, if I did something for the Make-A-Wish Foundation or something like that, or Habitat for Humanity, it was for the PR. Like, people can see I'm a good guy, No one saw this. Like, no one's writing about this. This is 2 men going through the most adverse conditions, adverse times of their lives, actually helping one another through something. And I think that's poetic in a way. And so that's what shifted. And so after that ended, I became the substance abuse TA, substance abuse counselor's TA. And when I walked out, also it convinced me to put myself up for parole. I kept denying my parole for really, I could have been out in, I think it was 6 months, and I stayed for 32.
Wow.
I just thought I was doing everybody a favor. No drama in my community. No drama for the family. No drama for anybody. It was really a selfish act, is what it was, because I didn't have any responsibility in there. I didn't have to do anything. Didn't have to work. Didn't have to worry about drugs, because no one smuggled in the drug that I liked. I'm a bougie druggie. I want my Vicodin. I don't want your slummy Suboxone or whatever it is in there. And so I didn't use. I watched TV. I got fat, ate bad, and believed that this was just it, and I was doing everybody a favor. And so I denied my parole
amazing,
like 4 times. And then my roommate convinced me after we'd worked together. He said, my first opportunity for parole is in December. I'm going to apply, and I want you to apply with me. So again, he helped facilitate my action in that point. So I did too. Sure enough, we both got granted parole. And he had to go into a treatment program after he was released for 6 months somewhere, where I was released right out to society, December 3rd, 2014. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary. It's not even been 10 years yet. I was hosting the Dan Patrick Show today, and I said that on the radio. I was like literally 10 years ago today, I was in whatever, a 10 by 12 cell. And now I was sitting in the chair hosting the Dan Patrick Show. So, I mean, that's a significant transition, and it's not lost on me that I'm the exception. Like, the rule is you go back.
So how did that transition happen?
It's been incredibly difficult. Because I think people just assume I walked out, former famous football player, lots of money, everything, all the doors open for you. I walked out of prison that day. The only two people there were my parents. Luckily, for whatever reason, they've unconditionally loved me. They didn't need a famous football playing son. They just wanted a son that, you know, was chaos free, had a peaceful life, that they could have an adult child who was, you know, high in character and integrity. That's all they ever wanted. And so they were there. And so that was something much more than most have when they walk out. But I didn't have any money. I couldn't rub two pennies together. I think people just assume I was rich or something like that. I'd blown every dollar I had. Well,
you have this high profile. You signed, I think it was a $30 million contract, right?
Well, it says it was, but back in the day, the only thing that was guaranteed was a signing bonus. But still, it ended up being about $15 million is what I made in the NFL, which is still so much money from where I come from, and should have lasted me a lifetime, and should be $100 million in the bank right now for me is what it should be. But it wasn't.
Where'd it go?
It went on the lifestyle of what I thought I deserved to have. You know, I also thought that I was going to make $5 million a year the rest of my life. Thought I would play for 20 years, and of course that isn't the case. A lot of private planes, Vegas, just the things that made everybody think that everything was okay for me. And then the drugs aspect of the thing really was never. I didn't know a drug dealer, so I wasn't paying a bunch of money for that. I was going to doctors, and I had a pretty good health insurance at the time, so my prescriptions were paid for at the pharmacy. You know. It was freewheeling, you know, free using drugs. So when I walked out, there was nothing, right? There was a downstairs bed to sleep in at mom and dad's house. There was no jobs. Credit score was like 500. You know, Mickey Mouse. I work for the Disney Corporation now. Mickey Mouse wasn't standing out there going, "Hey, come work for me." You know, no one wanted to be around me. No one wanted to have anything to do with me. First morning I wake up after spending the first night out of prison, there's a cartoon in my hometown newspaper, the Great Falls Tribune. And it was a character of me, and it said, "Ryan Leaf's out, lock up your medicine cabinets."
Oh, man.
And I just, for whatever hope I had developed in there by being of service to another human being, like it almost felt like it was immediately like withdrawn from me in that moment. Because I was like, oh yeah, there isn't any hope. This is who I am to everybody the rest of my life, and this is what I got to walk through. So muscle memory is to, I don't like feeling this way. Let me do what I'd always done and get pills. So luckily, I was able to kind of course correct in the moment, take a look in the mirror, go, dude, you're here because of what you did. Nobody else. Let's go. You got to go back to doing what you did in there that transformed you. And so I started going to the mission, and I started going to the homeless shelter and feeding them and clothing them and those little things, because my parole officer wouldn't let me go to treatment.
What?
He said people that walk out of prison from an institution don't want to go to another institution. I'd be a precedent-setting person in that instance. And I was like, I'm not asking to go to Mexico or something like that. I want to go to a treatment facility. And for 3 months, nothing. So those 3 months were very important in the transition. Living at home, which doesn't do anything for your ego at 38 years old, mom and dad, mom making you breakfast, dad still, monitoring your money. That's, as a 32-year-old, that just removes ego and pride. Like it's incredibly disheartening, to be honest. And frankly, the access to therapy there was non-existent. The healthcare system in Montana is crippled when it comes to mental health services and substance abuse. And so, again, maybe because just evidentiary proof to my parole officer what 3 months looked like down the line, he okayed a travel permit, and I went to treatment. And so that was in Southern California. And I spent 90 days in a treatment facility there, and I got out and I started working for a sober living house. I was a driver, and I worked as a manager. Paid $15 an hour. The only reason I tell you that is because I was making $5 million a year and was miserable. And I had just been offered a job now for $15 an hour. And when I got that first paycheck for like $232, like I took a snapshot and sent it to my parent. Like there's a different value you place on yourself, and you understand that money's not real. It can be, but what money was to me was something that just exacerbated any sort of character issues I had. So that's how it started. And LA is just rock solid in recovery there with 2,500 meetings a week. I put myself right in the middle of it so I don't get picked off. And then something that I didn't think was going to happen, I thought I could just, because I was comfortable with my own self now, it didn't matter that I was still a public person. I could just live a private life in recovery, and that's not the case. We're in March right now. April's next month when the NFL draft comes, and my name is absolutely batted about, particularly because of who I was drafted alongside. Peyton Manning was arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play. There's a ton of expectation for me. The way I crashed and burned just doesn't. My name gets brought up every year, so it won't disappear. So there was a point where I had to remove power from it and own it. And I started speaking, and that really took it to another level. Right. And my sponsor further down the road in this, he made a really good point to me. He was like, hey, as obnoxious and absolutely like grotesque as your downfall was, your recovery is going to be just as obnoxious and as much as possible out there. And so he had a good point. He had a good point. And that's what it's evolved into. And that's where the transformation is. And where it turns out to be is it turns out that to make your life better, you make it about other people. I always assumed in my narcissistic mindset my whole life was if there was anything to make my life better, it had to be about me, right? It didn't have to be about other people. So if I make it about somebody else, ironically, my life gets better. And that's what the last 9 years, really during my time in prison there, 10 years have been. It's been about everybody else. And then when you have a family and you have kids, then it's certainly about other people. When they lay that child in your arms and you get to do your skin on skin and you're just looking down and you're like, oh, everything I do from this point, there's like this wave of selflessness that just rolls over you because everything you do from that moment on is going to be about them. Every dollar I earn, anything and everything I do, the homes we live in or move to or whatever, it's not going to be about me. And so that's been the shift. And it's been a 180-degree lifestyle change. And I've had people absolutely carry me these last 10 years. No way in at all have I done any of this on my own at all. So I think that's important. And it's really important when I walk into prisons and talk about this, because I think no one wants to listen necessarily because they go, oh, it was easy for you. You walked out and no, there was nothing. I don't know if I can paint a better picture. I mean, there was nothing. No one wanted to be around me. No one wanted to give me a job, and then when you carry the baggage of being a felon and a drug addict, and in my case, like this very public dumpster fire, how are you supposed to do anything in the public eye, job wise? Like, you have to be incredibly good at it, because why would these people that have these broadcasting jobs, hell, I work for Sirius XM here. This is, I do shows on their radio stations, and like, why would they want a guy to do that unless he can do it well? And that's taken a lot of practice, a lot of hard work, and then a lot of support. There was someone here that really just carried me from the beginning with Sirius XM, Steve Cohen, and
he believes in you. Oh
man, he's a guardian angel for that, and he's living the good life now, retired and doing some real special work, around substance abuse too himself. So it's helping people, and so he's a big reason why there. But you don't get the opportunities I get unless I work really hard, and I have people that clearly don't hold my past against me, but rather see the possibility of a brighter future. And it's not about talking; it's about actually doing the work. So that's the long and short of it.
No, I think what you said is two things really important. One is that because of the stigmas, because of the baggage, and this is something that we've dealt with from day one, and we're on our 15th year of the last mile, is when people get out that have a criminal record, formerly incarcerated, they have to do twice as well to be accepted as the norm, right? So you overachieved just to get to that level. You had to because of that stigma.
Well, I had to get to where I did before getting in trouble, right? I mean, no one in the world thought I'd make it to the NFL in Montana. If you asked anybody growing up in Montana, would Brian Leaf go play in the NFL? They all look at you like you're crazy. It'd be a wonder if you got out of this town. And so I had to overachieve by miles there. In fact, I probably overachieved by miles in my criminality. I was a terrible criminal, so I probably really overachieved to get to the place where I got to. And then to be here, you're exactly right. And the stigma is the problem that has to be eliminated. The stigma is what ultimately is going to bring everybody to their knees. The idea that you need help is more frightening than actually getting the help that you need. That's the problem. That's stigma in definition, and it will be the ultimate thing that pulls people down. And the one part of this all, it has to be defeated first more than anything. Because if it's in the minds of the public of what it is and who someone is who's been incarcerated, unless you change that viewpoint or that stigma, it's not going to matter. And so you have to go about it differently and really try to make a positive change.
And the other thing that you did, and this is something we stress a lot because it seems like weakness and vulnerability, but you ask for help, right?
Yeah.
And that in many ways, it materializes in many ways. But asking for help is actually a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a statement I make all the time to people when I'm like, it's the strongest thing I've ever done. And I've done some pretty amazing things. And that is the hardest thing I did was get sober and own my past. Those are the hardest things that I've ever done. And so, but it also, being transparent and vulnerable, like, costs me nothing. Being self-deprecating costs me absolutely nothing and gives me everything.
Right.
And there's that prison mentality of respect and toughness, this toxic masculinity that exists. That's not true. It's prison formed, and you can't control what someone says, thinks, does to you. You control only what you do. I'm teaching it to my 6-year-old right now. Like, the 3 things you can control: behavior, attitude, and effort. Those are the only 3 things. And he's memorized them, but he doesn't understand what they mean yet. And he's like, I always said, what are the 3 things you can control? And he's like, effort, behavior, attitude. And I said, which one was this? And he's like, what? I memorized them. I said, you got your arms crossed and you're pouting. What do you think that is? He's like, attitude.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you can do. You're not having a very good attitude right now. He's like, yeah. I said, so, there's consequences to everything. You're going to change that attitude and have a different behavior here? And he's like, no. And so, he's got to make his own choices and figure it out.
Well, it's funny, MC Hammer's on our board, and one of the biggest things he said, because he's been through a journey, he says one of the most powerful things you can do is control your own narrative, right? And you're doing that because people are telling your story, but now for the first time, you're telling your story. And that's so powerful.
Well, I got sick and tired of somebody else telling my story because they never told it the right way. No one knows my story like I do. And I remember ESPN came in and did it. And you could just tell that they already had their story done. And it didn't really matter what we contributed to it. So my wife and I, at that moment, when ESPN, first off, they didn't let me see it before it aired. But they expected me to go market for it and promote it before it went to air. And but I wasn't in a position of any sort of power at the time that I thought this could change and help a ton of people. And it did. It did. It could have been so much better. And at that moment, my wife came back to me and she's like, we have to build an arm to our company on a production side, and we're the ones that are going to control your story from this point on. And that's what we've done. And now it's easy too, because it's the truth. Like, I'm not ashamed of anything of it. I'm okay with the guy I see in the mirror. So I don't care if anybody knows this, that, and the other. In fact, it's pretty public knowledge to most people. But the things that I know that are actual truths, I can speak the truth to it. And every time I speak, it's the same. It's not, you may come hear me speak and you may hear a different speech every single time in a different manner, but it's all the same information, because I don't have to remember what kind of rabbit trails I was telling other people and was trying to connect the dots everywhere like I used to in my addict days, you know. And so that's what's made it really, really good, and the transition more palpable when I get the opportunity to do it.
I have a question for you, and that is that while you were incarcerated, you were helping the community. You were helping the men who couldn't read, probably helping them with a lot of other things and giving them hope, which, as we know from the last mile, we can teach software engineering, we teach web development, we teach music and audio video production. But our students always tell us, yes, the skills are invaluable, but what you give us is hope for the future. So you helped the community inside. And then when you came home, you had the community in recovery. And so I understand that you've created the NFL Brotherhood, which is a community to help lift up other players. And you share your experience to help them to better their lives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's only 27,000 of us ever.
Only, right.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. In 100 years of football, there's only 27,000 NFL players.
Incredible.
I think people just assume NFL players grow on trees because every year they're just, it's not.
The teams are big.
It's the hardest thing to achieve. It really, really is. And so it's a brotherhood, it's small. And I was sick and tired of the NFL failing them, when they were gone, when they were no longer useful. And so it was very important to me to be there for guys that needed it, because when I needed it, there wasn't any sort of program available. No one cared that I was throwing my life away. I didn't live up to the expectation of being a great NFL player. So to the hell with you, unless the shield is portrayed well, the shield will flat out, walk away from you. And so when Vincent Jackson died, alone in a hotel room, a place that I'd been dying before, alone in a hotel room, I don't know what, I was overly emotional about it. And from that point on, I was trying to facilitate any kind of way to make more impact. And a man by the name of Armando Colombo, he's the CEO of the Menninger Clinic in Houston, Texas. It's one of the most highly sought after psychiatric substance abuse facilities, led by their executive director, physician, Dr. Shorter. And I made a relationship with him and grew that into something where I became their ambassador. And now there's an actual asset at the end of my hand when I reach out to an NFL brother, where maybe before I just had the story and had the ability to relate to them, but now we have an actual place where they can go and get help. They've gone to work with the NFL Trust, which is a benefits package that is given to all NFL players once they leave the NFL, which allows them to go to the Menninger Clinic. And so a lot of my interactions when I go down to Houston, and I'll be down in Houston in 2 weeks, working alongside the Menninger Clinic again. A lot of times when I show up there, there's a bunch of former players that are ongoing some psychiatric and substance use disorder work, and so I can have tangible, purposeful, effect, and that's more meaningful than anything for me. Is that because I don't want anybody ever to feel the way I did, or end up in the place in which I did. I don't want anybody to feel that way. And if the NFL is not going to do it, we have to do it for ourselves, plain and simple. And so that's been the path through that process.
Well, we've definitely found that the community is so important, as Beverly said. We have a large hundreds of people that have been through the program, and there is a natural, organic community that's evolved where they now support each other, and it's so cool to watch this organic, because the most effective is the genuine organic growth.
Yeah,
and that's been really effective. I want to tell you, though, that the Last Mile now is in Montana.
Right.
We're in the Montana prison in Deer Lodge.
The Montana State Prison. I was there for for the observation process, right? The points
reception.
Reception. Yeah. Oh God, it's like
intake and
the intake process. When I watch TV and I watch movies and stuff, and I watch the process, right? I see them go, they get the intake process and they get stripped, and it just like triggers like
dehumanizing.
It's so And I remember that. And then I was in the Montana State Prison for like 3 weeks, and then up one night they came in and just said, "Boom, you're headed to Shelby." Threw you in like a dog kennel, for like 5 hours. Guys pissing themselves. It's just it was just dehumanizing. And they take you to this place, and you're in a new prison. You just shipped around and moved around like cattle, and that's exactly what it was. So I'm so happy you're there. And
I'm going to invite you to visit at some point, because I think it'd be super effective, right, and super inspirational for again any facility we're in, but especially because you're a home guy from Montana.
And there's an unbelievable golf course right outside the Rock Creek Cattle Company is unbelievable.
Another reason to go there.
Yes, it is so good. It's a Fazio. They got elk running around up on it. It's
all right, done
deal.
Okay, next road
trip. We actually just hosted our first graduation from our web development program in Montana, and it was a very moving experience because they allowed the family members to come in to watch their loved ones
graduate,
get certificates
Yep.
in web development. There are also representatives from Montana high tech community. We've had a few of our students return to society.
Matter of fact, we just hired one.
That's right.
Yep. Within the last mile, we just hired a graduate out of Montana.
And the second cohort has started, and they're learning full stack software engineering.
Yeah.
But their families look up, and their children look up to them with so much respect, and they become interesting. And how do you overcoming all obstacles?
Well, the idea to probably the family members, for them to look at someone probably in the eyes of them being in the worst possible place they can imagine, the most adverse conditions, to go up and beyond and overachieve in a place where no one expects you to. Like the bar is so low, and for you to achieve and do things that no one else is willing to do in there. I tell guys when I'm working with them in prison, I'm like no one's gonna really offer up or give you the opportunity to do anything. And this is a huge choice on your part to make a shift and a change. You're going to have to do the work. If you are lucky enough to have a program like the Last Mile available to you, you're the one that you got to take advantage of it.
That's right.
No one's going to walk in and say, you have to do this.
So you're absolutely right. And I wanted to just share with you, you told us that you decided not to go to the parole board 3 times and stayed inside. We had a student in our women's program at the Indiana Women's Prison who was up for parole, and she asked to stay inside for an additional year so she could enroll in and complete the Last Mile program. 1 year.
Yeah. And she's been hired by the Indiana Pacers basketball team as a tech
in an IT position,
which is super
just
cool.
Recently,
because she homegrown Hoosier, now working for the Pacers. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. State of Indiana is incredibly progressive when it comes to giving back to the criminal justice system. I don't know why this is. It's Peyton Manning country, but I've spent more time in the state of Indiana speaking and working. My warden from my Montana State Prison, he moved on to a jail, a facility in Indianapolis that I went and spoke to for him. Like, he might be my best reference, to be honest with you. Guy ended up has gotten me like 10 speaking gigs since I've gotten out. It's amazing.
Well, Governor Holcomb is a huge proponent, and he's become a good friend of the program, and we're in 4 prisons there. So
2 men and 2 women's facilities.
Yeah. Nice.
So Ryan, we really appreciate this. You doing this, sharing your story, and being so committed to the community. We really appreciate that. One question we'd love to ask before we wrap is, there are many things in criminal justice that you could change, but what would one thing be that really sticks out to you?
Well, it's the for-profit prisons. I think, the fact that they exist, how they incentivize DAs and judges to sentence prison time because the bed's are already paid for. the state's going to be paying for them regardless. Let's put bodies in it. I think that is wrong. I think that nonviolent drug offenders clearly don't belong in prisons. They belong in treatment facilities. I'm an example of that. I didn't know a drug dealer when I went to prison. Now I know 100, mentality. That's what that is, And so that for me would be the biggest change. The other thing is I've watched the experiment play out in Oregon, and it's not been good around the decriminalization of illicit drugs. You look at the Portugal model, which has been incredible overseas. The state of Colorado in legalizing marijuana and taxing it. How crime is dissipated. How they've put so much money back into the treatment of substance use disorder. So there's many examples for that. I'm a huge proponent of decriminalization. You remove it. You take the fentanyl out of the pills that are counterfeit on the streets. Argument with my mom all the time. She says everybody's going to be lined up around the corner at Walgreens to get into. And I said, Mom, not everybody's like your son. And your experiences is your son. Do you think my two brothers and dad would be lined up at Walgreens to get pills? No, right? You tax it. You give them information on how to get help. It's like clean needle exchange. It's harm reduction. We're about harm reduction right now, and the biggest thing that's factoring into all this is that drug dealers don't care about their clients. They'll sell you a pill that has it's like literally cyanide in it for people who've never done drugs before, and they die and they're gone. And so yeah, those would be the two biggest changes. I'm pretty progressive when it comes to decriminalization. You remove the DEA. That's less government for Republicans out there if they have a problem with it too. It's all of those things. Decriminalization of all drugs, make it legal, tax it, present treatment and possibilities, and that will eliminate a ton of these overpopulated prisons. Because, there's a reason why we're the most populated prison system in the world. Yeah. It's just another society, and a large portion of it are individuals that are sitting in there because of non-violent drug offenses.
That's right.
So yeah, those are the two main factors probably that I would change in criminal justice.
We wholeheartedly agree, and it's part of a mission that we have as well. But so much appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure this is not the last conversation we're going to have.
That would be wonderful. I love what you guys are doing, and if I can, like I said, if I can do anything to help, please don't hesitate.
Thank you for that.
And we're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
I know.
There you go.
I love it.
Yep.
But it would be an honor.
You got two new grandkids. You got young grandkids.
We do.
You just if you want to come over and babysit sometime, just let us know.
Party at our house.
We're very capable of that.
All right.
Again, thanks a lot very much, and we'll be back soon on the Last Mile Radio on Sirius XM. Stay tuned.